Hey there, my name is Chris Acton with Acton Creative, and this is a handwoven experience. And in this episode, I'm gonna talk about sewing handwoven fabric. Now you may be thinking, okay, rumor is you don't sew, Chris, which is absolutely true. And that is my big asterisk caveat for this episode, is that I do not actually sew. Once upon a time, I did make my own prom dress, but that was decades ago. And the minute I started trying to work with handwoven fabric, I was like, nope. Someone else needs to help me with this. However, it's been many, many years, and I've worked with many seamstresses to develop techniques and find certain products that help when you're working with hand-woven fabric. So I want to make sure I share those tips and products with you. So I may not know much, but I'm going to share what I know. Are you ready? Let's do it. Now, whether you have just started or you've been weaving for a long time, you have probably come to the realization that hand-woven fabric has its own set of challenges. It is not the same as going to the fabric store and buying a yard of fabric. It does not react the same, doesn't act the same in a sewing machine and other applications, which is not a bad thing. We just have to adjust our philosophy, our approach for how we deal with this kind of fabric. For me especially, I like to use chunkier yarns that have a little bigger spacing. So there's always a thread that's gonna fall apart the second you take scissors to it. Always, that is always one of the big concerns with working with my particular kind of fabric that I like to make. So that's one of the big things to tackle right out of the gates. So let me introduce you to a couple products that help with holding it all together and getting it to have the structure that you want for the final product. Here's my first suggestion. Wonder Under. Have you heard of this? Wonder Under is this magical, I don't even know how it works exactly, but it's a thin kind of, think of like a heavy tissue paper kind of texture to it, but you put it in between two pieces of fabric and it will fuse them together. Like magic from the sewing gods, it'll fuse it together. And here is how we have kind of used Wonder Under over the years. When I'm making, this is my clutch that I have made for years, and here's what we found. We needed some way to get the hand-woven fabric to adhere to the lining so we could turn it to do the zipper here. Now, we ended up choosing to do kind of a raw edge here, which doesn't bother me too much, but if that makes you crazy, you can find some other way to get a finished edge around the zipper there. But we use Wonder Under in this kind of application where I want the hand-woven fabric to adhere directly to the lining of the product that I'm making. See that? That's where we use that guy right there. So Wonder Under, that's my first suggestion for you. My next suggestion is some good old interfacing. Now, you've probably heard of interfacing if you've done any kind of sewing in your past life at all, and you know it's amazing. It'll do all kinds of cool things. It comes in kind of a, little bolt like this, and you can get as many yards as you want, and it is typically has kind of a soft kind of finish side on one side, but then the other has little things of glue, little beads of glue on the one side, and you just iron it on to your fabric. Now, there's different weights that you can use. This is an iron-on interfacing, which you don't have to use. There are some that are sew-in, which is a little different technique, but we love this kind of a middle weight, kind of a medium weight that has the glue kind of little dots on one side and a finish on the other, and that, in so many cases, that's how we start. Lay out the hand-woven fabric, iron on the interfacing over the whole thing before the scissors get anywhere near it, just so that it doesn't fall apart, right? As I mentioned, the kind of fabric that I like to weave is typically a little chunkier. It's not real fine. So those scissors, you gotta consider what's gonna happen when the scissors get to the fabric. So here's an example of where we use iron-on interfacing. So this was a roll of fabric, you see that. Laid the whole thing out, iron on the interfacing so it holds together. Then when the scissors come to it, it's gonna do a better job of staying in place. Also, zigzag, little zigzag stitch, which is gonna help hold it all together. So you can use one, both, any kind of combination, because you wanna make sure that your piece then is gonna hold together in time for you to sew it, in this case, to the lining of the little wallet that I've got here. So Wonder Under is my first suggestion. Any kind of interfacing is my second suggestion. Absolutely. Feel free to use those tools for whatever you're using. Now, one of the things to consider, and this isn't really a product, but more a technique, is as I mentioned, you have all these little, the second you cut it, you're gonna have all these little ends to kind of contend with, right? So whatever you're making, you have to kind of reinforce that more than you normally would. Because if you are gonna make yourself a pair of pajama pants and you go get some light fleece from the fabric store and you cut them, you're not gonna worry about it like falling apart for the next 2 inches. That's not something you normally have to worry about. With hand woven, even if you're using a tighter set and smaller yarns, there's still that kind of concern that those little ends are going to poke out. So you just have to kind of think through what that looks like. And here, I'll give you an example of something where we had to kind of tweak our approach to get it the way we liked it. I take my scraps and send them over to Joyce, one of my seamstresses, and she makes these lovely, look at these cute little ornaments, right? Now, you'll notice this is one of those fancy machines she has that you kind of program it and does all the little embroidery to it. It is very, very slick. However, when we first started doing it, we only did one little exterior kind of row. And can you see the little ends? The little ends would start to kind of pop out if they weren't caught exactly right. So we started to employ kind of a double row kind of system here to make sure that the edges, the little ends, wouldn't kind of pop out as we were making the ornaments. So no matter how you're using it, that is one of the things you have to kind of just think through, is that those ends are going to have a life of their own. And what kind of extra precaution do you need to take to make sure that you're catching it in the final product? Now, I realize that that is just like the tip of the iceberg, and that may not have solved all of your sewing problems. However, if you are just starting out and you're like, I just made this beautiful fabric, now I want to cut it and do something with it, you're going to need a couple little things to start to get you going so that you can make the most of your fabric, but also then safely shape it into the final product that you want. So feel free to, in the comments, write down your tips and tricks for sewing hand-woven fabric, because I know that that is just like the little tip of the iceberg for all of the great ideas you can employ when you are taking your hand-woven fabric and making it into a final product that is more than just a roll. It's actually something that you can take with you out into the world. All right, friends. Let me know your tips, put those in the comments below, and we'll all share them with each other so that we can all become much better informed when it comes to sewing our hand-woven fabric. All right, have a great week. Happy weaving.